Well, good morning, everybody. To get us started, I just want to give you a quick overview of what's going to be in this forecast video. We're going to talk at the beginning, right, about the cooler temperatures that are in place now, but later on, we're going to be discussing how the longer-term pattern out there at week 2 is starting to moderate, which means the GFS is trending a bit more to what the European solution has been if you've been kind of watching the videos as of late. I've got to talk about the recent precip and what it means in terms of kind of undoing some of our seasonal drought issues. And at the end, we're going to have a discussion about El Nino and its progression away from El Nino, actually toward neutral conditions quite soon. And honestly, that transition started a while ago, but we're going to start to see the indicators, especially the changes in ocean temperatures, really beginning to show up. So let's get into it. What you've been watching here is just the last 24 hours where there are weather stations that are either approaching or tying or breaking records. That's what these maps are. And this comes from a website called coolweather.com, COOLWX.com. It's a great one to go check out. And there's a lot of cold air this morning that's come in behind this recent system. So if you take a look at our 5 a.m. temperatures, or 5:50 a.m. temperatures, we've got single digits in parts of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and freezing temperatures that made it pretty far to the south, all the way to like Amarillo, getting here over into parts of northern Arkansas as well. So pretty chilly morning this morning. Behind this system, temperatures have already dropped off 10 to 20 degrees, and we're going to deal with some of this colder air for a little bit. But the pattern's about to make a bit of a shift with the behavior of that trough we talked about all week long, rolling up and down the west coast north to south. And that's going to open up some mild air back into an area that has been hit recently with some colder conditions. But what can't be ignored is the fact that if we look at the satellite data from yesterday, we can start to see where that snowpack has been put into place. And I just love looking at these satellite images to find this area. And just need to see that. But this is going to have an impact on the low-level temperatures. And as a result, there's going to be a pretty sharp divide somewhere in through this area where there's going to be a frontal boundary that sits. And that frontal boundary will be key for the next systems as they kind of push across the country as to their trajectory. But overall, I love the snowpack. Now, as you look at it, as it starts to clear out here, you can see how sharp the divide was where the snow was in parts of Nebraska, for example, or in the Red River Valley of the North, or even here, as we just got a brand new image this morning. Let me take you back again into parts of southern Saskatchewan. So there's a lot of nuance to this past system as it rolled through, and I'll be anxious to see what we can see later today as the cloud cover begins to clear. But I can look at this, which is the last 72 hours of total accumulated snow through last night about 7 p.m. Central Time. And now we kind of got the full idea on what came out of Nebraska, where the blizzard warnings extended, getting into parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin. So there's places in here that picked up 12 to 18 inches of snow, probably locally higher amounts, especially right in through here. Okay, this will be an interesting map to watch update when I get the new one at 9 o'clock today when I run this code again. But it's the season-to-date percent of normal snowfall. And what's important is, just grander scheme of things, the numbers came up in Nebraska, and these numbers right in through here, which were in the teens and 20s, are now in like the 30s and 40s. So we brought the percentages up and the deficits down. So season-to-date snowfall, these numbers are not as bad as they were a week ago, I guess is the way to think about it. But you compare this to a year ago, and look at this. I mean, this is snow water equivalent now, and this is what it was a year ago. So the difference is huge for the Mississippi Basin, for the Red River of the North, for the way that the snow is going to melt and get into those river systems. But also, don't forget, a year ago, when a lot of this snow was on the ground, we did not have a deep freeze in the soil beneath it. So a lot of this was some protection against the early spring drought of a year ago. And we've added some, but we've still not made up that full deficit. So I just wanted to show you that again here. All right. Last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. We spent some time yesterday discussing, this region right into here that just got completely missed. There's a few places in Kansas and Oklahoma coming out of Texas. And by the way, for the next couple of days in Texas, we do have the risk of wildfire here as well. We think about this part of the Ohio Valley getting into the Eastern Great Lakes region, and again, isolated heavier amounts, but that's just it. They were kind of isolated. Heaviest precipitation was farthest to the south out of this system, where we saw some of the storms kind of training a bit in their trajectory and locally putting down some extremely heavy rainfall. And to be honest, this is kind of an area that we don't need a whole lot of additional rainfall as we go forward. So it's good to see that the new forecast has given them a little bit of a drier time period with some more mild air to kind of get caught up on some lost time. But just to kind of give you some bigger perspective, if you remember when I showed you this earlier this week on Monday, we also looked at a lot last week, this was all dark red up until this recent system. Now, this is only valid through yesterday on the 26th in the morning, but as it stands, there are still holes that need filled in. And while I'm not so concerned about this here in the Great Basin, or even what's been in Southern California, especially what's expected down in this area, this large area in the central and southern plains, still back in parts of South Dakota, getting into Wyoming, and this mid-south region. In addition to that, we take a look at Florida as well. So there are still some areas that need some corrective action from the atmosphere going forward, and we just got to figure out if it's going to do that. So this morning's all hazards weather map. We have freeze watches and warnings and advisories out for this part of the Mid-South, getting back here into Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Same thing for down here in Arizona. You can see the flood watches that have been extended here as this next system stalls that frontal boundary. You'll see that in a few moments as well. We have the end of the winter weather advisories here for this system that's finally exiting through Ontario this morning. We'll continue to watch the west, but remember the next system in the west is not going to plow through the country like the previous one did. It's going to slide north-south. We just kind of have to have a discussion about where that's going to go. So let me take it back. I was kind of a little bit ahead of us this morning. Let's pick this up at 8 o'clock. We're going to watch through the middle of today two features. Big front comes in the west, okay, from that low that's going to just slide straight south. But this frontal boundary here stalls out, and even by this evening getting into the overnight hours, we just have flow that on either side, one side it's coming in like this, the other side it's coming in like that. So the front doesn't move. The trigger doesn't move. The convergence doesn't move. So the rain just keeps hitting the same area. As we play forward, this is through early morning on Thursday. Some pretty intense snow could be moving through parts of Idaho into Montana. And this is good. We needed to add more snow to the Northern Rockies and the Cascades. We'll take a look at those snowfall totals in a second. But playing through Thursday night, getting into Friday early in the morning, I just want to show you what's going on here. So if you notice, there's a large area of high pressure sitting here. And there's a little kink in the isobars sitting there. And we know there's snowpack sitting in this area. And the point behind that is to say there's going to be a front that just kind of lingers in this region, kind of on and off for the end of this week and the weekend. And what's important about that is frontal boundaries are sources of lift in the atmosphere. So this will be the region over which before this low that sneaks north-south gets out, that might be where we get some precipitation. But this high is going to pump some mild air back in place. And you can see that when I show you, this is what the low-level wind field is going to look like by the time we get into Friday. And there's that high, and you see that frontal boundary. So there's a little bit of low pressure here, but that's where the snow is. And the boundary is just going to sit right in this vicinity. But as we play it forward, let's just jump forward a couple here. Let's go ahead and get out there to like the 31st. You notice there's still that same kind of idea. The high is sitting here, the flow's coming around, something's coming in like this, it's kind of making the turn, there's a little bit of deformation. So there's your band. That's kind of where your frontal boundary is going to be. And here's the low that started here and just went straight south by the time we get into Easter Sunday. Okay, so let's watch it again. This is Friday afternoon. Here is our high over low, sending this low to the south. And let's just play it on through Saturday and into Sunday. So again, there will be a little area in here that the squeeze kind of gets put on the atmosphere to get some rising motion while we wait for this trough to come out. This isn't truly a blocked pattern. It's very highly amplified, but it doesn't stick around long enough to be considered a block, because by Monday into really Monday night into Tuesday, we start to see it progress. And what I'll be watching will be the jet stream winds in this area and the kind of teaming up of one trough here and the broader cutoff low here for what this could be doing for the risk of some stronger storms as we start to blow this pattern out early into the first week of April, really the first and the second. So by the 3rd of April, getting into the 4th, deep low goes into New England. We need to talk about what that could mean in terms of snow and cold, really cold air kind of punching through here. But after this is the 4th and 5th. The models keep wanting to just drop a trough in the west, keeping it cooler, which we need to break away from this. Heat needs to return to the western United States for agriculture soon. And to keep getting into this pattern, it could become problematic if we're not accumulating the heat units fast in the west as we approach April, especially into California. But what this is overall going to do is provide more warmth across the eastern half of the country, going into the middle time frame of April, if this is truly representative of what the pattern's going to be. And I have big questions about this, given that the model keeps defaulting to this look, and the fact that the MJO could be moving enough to start to stir things up for us a little bit, removing the broader troughs for a short while toward middle of April. All right, so bigger picture then on the precip side. Remember, with that low sliding to the south first through the weekend and then moving out, there's a lot of wet weather in the southwest. We are not expecting much except for what could be sitting on that boundary here. And therefore, the south, parts of the mid-south, most of the plains get a drier look for a while. But the stalled out frontal boundary coming very soon, today and early tomorrow, is what's prompting a lot of this. Plus, remember, there is that system out there in the first week of April that's going to roll through that area. Now, I apologize. I have contacted the ECMWF. I've worked with my team of data scientists on this. I'm still having a problem. At like hour 72 and hour 96, that my data feed with the ECMWF folks is giving me some missing files. So ignore this when those times come. We'll just focus on the GFS. So the NAM already took us through Thursday into Friday. And there's the low sliding down the west coast. And again, there's that one missing file at hour 72. So just it's wrong. Let's get here. And you can see that the GFS is a bit more aggressive on the snow as we get out there toward early Saturday morning, but there will be snow in the Cascades. There'll be snow through the Great Basin and some moisture getting into that area. And what you'll notice is that by Saturday, there's the other missing hour, sorry. By Saturday, where's the possibility of some precipitation? It kind of sits on that front we keep talking about. And here it is getting into early Sunday afternoon and evening, getting into Monday. So there it is. Okay, it's in both models. It's a little bit disorganized. There's no deep low there to kind of tell us, exactly where this precip's going to be, but it's a battle between two high pressure systems, one here and one there. So the squeeze is put on the atmosphere in the middle. Now, what I'll watch for is Monday night. That's when we finally get some sort of cyclogenesis out of this. In other words, there's a trough in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, adding spin to this, and the low will start to form. And I think on Monday night, we're going to have to keep an eye out on this region for the risk of some strong to severe storms. That's just the current thinking. But that low begins to exit toward New England. And by Tuesday into Wednesday, watch how quickly the European exits, delivering a lot of snow into parts of the Northeast here. But the GFS is later. This is the third getting into the fourth. And its slower progression brings more of that into the Northeast. And out there next Wednesday, getting into Thursday, that slower progression, I'm going to have to watch it until there's not something to watch to see if this is going to be the case with some snow in this area. So with all of that, let's kind of give you a quick 4-model rundown of at least the next week before we get into that final system in New England. And here is the artificial intelligence forecast from the ECMWF. And again, we're kind of highlighting those drier areas pretty clearly on this. This is the WPC forecast. So this comes from the Weather Prediction Center. Low runs north-south, drier in through here, drier in through there, and also drier behind the front, but very wet right along the coast from this current system. And there's our stalled out boundary. This is from the ECMWF operational run. See, a lot of consistency in the models, but the nuances between the placement of the heaviest rain, it's always, different between the models. And here's finally the GFS. Now, what I like in one area, okay, is this. This area needs a little bit of a break because you go back to the beginning of February till now, we've been extremely wet. And this is already a time of year where we should be going pretty quickly on getting crops established and moving forward. But as it stands, if I had to pick out a couple of dry stripes across this map, there's still problem areas in through here. And also in this part of West Texas, New Mexico, and notice in parts of North Carolina as well. Same thing with the Columbia Basins. We're just trying to identify those areas that need more work as we progress into spring. On the soil moisture side of it, though, you can see how wet things have been down here, but this 100-centimeter map is one that I've been monitoring now for weeks, months actually, since last fall's drought, and we need to see some more spring rain here before we actively start planting a crop. Okay, so can we get it? Well, you know that if we think about the snowy side of it, the farther we get into April, the less the chances are of getting good snows down south. So what I do want to point out is with that next system on Monday, Tuesday, that's the one that I'm kind of concerned about the severe storm risk here. There is a halfway decent chance of picking up some more snow across the northern plains coming out of the the Rocky Mountains here all the way to the Great Lakes. And you can see that the European model also attempts to drop the better chances, third, fourth, fifth time frame here into this part of the Northeast. And that's where actually the Climate Prediction Center was keeping an eye on this as well, from the 3rd to the 9th, just with that system kind of slowly exiting. We'll have to watch it and see its evolution, but wanted you to be aware of this map they made yesterday. Okay, just to see it one more time, the GFS was the most aggressive. So here it is, the timing 3rd, 4th. See it right in through there? That's what I'm going to keep an eye on. Now, there's other stuff going on, like this, out there on Monday, Tuesday, but got some question marks as to whether or not that snow's going to get that far south. Sierra Nevada really picking up some good snow, though. Another, 18 to 24 inches. So this is the piece of the jet stream we're watching next week. And that's why I think there's the risk of some stronger storms here. But take a look at this. As we go past the first week of April, which is here, the pattern actually goes back to something that I find quite compelling. And that is strong subtropical jet, weaker polar jet, and flow that kind of does that characteristic check mark across the United States. And that particular type of flow would historically tell me that it could be more active as we approach, the first 10 days of April. But without a strong polar branch to this, I don't know where we're going to get big cyclogenesis, big storm systems. I mean, every time I've told you about a big one, right, it seems to originate with strong jet stream level winds here that dive into the west and eject. This subtropical jet's just not enough in its current position this year to be driving these big systems. But the week 2 forecast, I think that the CPC is the wettest. Here's the European model and the GFS, which are actually quite similar right now. I don't know if I had to pick, I always kind of default to the European because of skill scores. Possibly a little wetter here and wetter in the south. No change in the narrative there. So enjoy the little week or so of some drier weather in this area, because that subtropical jet, if it lives over you, that's what you end up getting. But that's what we're seeing right now for week 2. Okay, temperature-wise, even with the colder air that's come in, March still shows up, as a top 20 warmest March in this whole region here. And as I said, the West needs to be accumulating heat and needs to get the heat going quickly, especially into California. So over the next 7 days, we'll just watch this map every day for the next probably 45 days. This is where our frost risk is. And if we look at the temperatures, they're going to respond to that change in that high pressure cell over the Gulf of Mexico. Watch. Here's Wednesday's highs. Let's blow that up for you. Getting into Thursday and Friday. So see it sitting down here, opening this whole area up. By Saturday, you can see right where the front is, right here. And as we get into the weekend, the colder air into California is because the low sinks to the south. Now, Sunday into Monday, what we have is a combination of a low here and a broader trough there. So remember, we kind of looked at it. It looks something like that, didn't it? And so this will be the area that's opened up already to some destabilization in the atmosphere, the warmer temperatures. And that's why we think as this system comes through early next week, there could be something to talk about with strong to severe storms, somewhere in this vicinity. That's Monday into Tuesday, though. And as we look out there farther, as I mentioned at the beginning, there has been some moderation in the longer-term temperature forecast. That's day 5 through 10. And take a look at this, day 10 through 15. This is playing into that narrative that as we approach the middle of April, we get into a milder pattern for the midsection of the country. That's the GFS solution, which has trended more toward the European. And the European solution is now even more mild than it was the last couple of days here. This needs to go. But that could help spawn better storm systems in the midsection of the country, but we've got to get some heat into the southwestern United States. Okay, what is the kind of last point of today's forecast video? The MJO we talked about earlier this week. If it does truly get over here into phase 4-5, we do slack the pattern off a bit, warm things up, and we'll see a rapid and early planting of the midsection of the country. All right. I think this will translate into warmth across the whole of the United States if we spend some time over here in April. But what's interesting about the movement of the MJO is more about the trade wind behavior. And we get all these questions about, well, when are we going to see La Nina? The telltale sign that a La Nina is present means that maps like this or graphs like this look like this for day in and day out and day in and day out for months. And what is it? Well, these blue-greens represent stronger than normal trade winds. That is the telltale characteristic of every La Nina. Yeah, we look at ocean temperatures, but the trade winds are ultimately the fluctuation in the atmosphere that says El Nino or La Nina. If this was all red, like it was for most of winter, we're talking about El Nino. When we see them blue, we're talking about La Nina. My point behind that is there's going to be a lot of discussion. You're going to hear a lot of this from other meteorologists and even non-meteorologists, that as soon as this cold water, remember we talked about it weeks and weeks ago, but as soon as this cold water from the depths starts to nudge its way up here, you're going to start to see along the Pacific Ocean surface, so this is the equator right here, South America's on this side, Indonesia's on this side, that cold water is going to upwell, which means there's going to be a stripe that shows up right in through here of cooler water. Now, as we approach summer, the correlation with U.S. weather patterns and El Nino is nowhere near as strong as it is in, or I should say, a correlation with ENSO, that means El Nino and La Nina. Okay, the correlation with it in our summer patterns is not nearly as strongly correlated as the North Pacific. So again, this is the area to watch, not this. This will be important later for the hurricane season as an indicator of tropical wind shear strength across the Atlantic, but right now, this is the water that you got to watch to see if it gets colder and colder and colder. If it does, then this means cooler West Coast, cooler East Coast heat in the midsection of the country. That's what it's going to mean for summer. So that is where I'm going to watch. But these water temperatures are most important to see in May and June for the setup for summer. So it's just a monitoring thing right now. So what's the last thing we are monitoring to wrap this video up? It's South America. And again, we know that the next 7 to 8 days is quite wet across Brazil's safrinha crop. Drier in southern Brazil, maybe some storms into Buenos Aires. But the question is if we make that jump out, and we get here into phase 4-5, does this go over drier in April? Even though I've said that for weeks now, I'm still waiting to see if that's actually going to manifest itself in the forecast. So we'll monitor it. And as I always say, I'll tell you about more tomorrow. Have a good one. Thanks.